Good morning. I'm going to attempt to record our read aloud. So, right before we left school, I asked the fifth graders if they would be okay with us rereading Bound for Oregon. And the fifth graders that were there said it was fine. So, I'm going to be reading this to you, and hopefully I will figure out how to get it posted okay. It will probably be a good idea for you to keep track of the characters in the story. Like we've done in class, you can write them down and describe them a little bit so you can keep track of who's who. The story is about the Todd family and their journey to Oregon. There's some other characters too that you will meet along the way. There's also a map that I will be posting later for you to kind of keep track of, but it's in the front of the book, and it looks like that. All right, Chapter 1, Bound for Oregon. Lavinia, are you awake? I whispered. Silvery light from the full harvest moon streamed in through the curtains. My sister, Lavinia, was curled up next to me in the bed we shared, a small, still lump beneath the bed covers. It wasn't she who had awakened me. Was it the bright moonlight? Then I heard voices through the thin floor below. They were talking about Oregon again. All that fall it had been happening. Ever since my father had gone to town one Saturday morning and heard a stranger talking about this marvelous country out west. Standing up on a box in the middle of the sidewalk, the man had held forth about the wonders of this western paradise. The beautiful valleys of rich black soil, the outstanding timber and water, the mild climate that could not be beaten anywhere. A farmer could take up free land out there, he said, 640 acres of the best farmland in the world. And they do say, gentlemen, the man added with a smile, that out in Oregon, pigs run around under the acorn trees, round and fat and already cooked, with knives and forks sticking out of them so you can cut off a slice whenever you are hungry. We all had laughed when we heard this, and the rest of us had forgotten about it, but not Father. Now I could hear his voice and that of his cousin, Will, along with the deep, solemn voice of our neighbor down the road, George Kimball. They were talking about Indians. I couldn't help myself. I had to know what they were saying. Usually, my little sister slept so deeply that even the cannons fired off on the 4th of July would not wake her. Just to make sure, I wormed my way over to the edge of the bed and waited a moment. Lavinia did not stir. Carefully, I slid out from the warm sheets and crept to the edge of the sleeping loft. I could make out a rough triangle of the room below, the tall stone fireplace, one of the splint-bottomed easy chairs that Father had made, a pair of dust-stained boots stretched out on the hearth rug. Surely, Todd, you have not forgotten the Whitman massacre. 14 killed, including women and children, and that was only 4 years ago. I could imagine our neighbor's face as he spoke, long and wrinkled and mournful looking, like one of his old hound dogs. They say the Indians are quiet now, Father replied mildly. Ah, but for how long? The Pawnees are the worst tribe. They will steal your horses and your stock. Mr. Kimball's voice rose, then abruptly faded, so I had to strain to make it out. Even, I hear tell, your women. Beneath my thin nightgown, a cold shiver traced its way down my backbone. Indians? Massacres? Stealing women? How could Father even think about making such a dangerous journey? And why would he want to move again? I wondered. It had been less than 2 years since we had packed up everything we owned into a wagon and made our way from Indiana to Arkansas. Back then, it was the ague that had made us move. I could still remember that sickness with its awful chills and fever, as if I'd had it yesterday. First, our bones would start to ache. Then we would grow so cold that we had to go to bed. We would lie there shivering and shaking so hard that our teeth chattered and even the slats on the bed rattled. The next minute, we would be burning up with fever. After a few days, the sickness would go away and then it would come back. Lavina and I swallowed so much bitter quinine, the taste was always in our mouths. Our relatives in Arkansas wrote to Father that they did not have the ague there. So finally he decided to make the move, and none of us had been sick hardly a day since. The journey can take 6 months or more, Cousin Will joined in now, his thin voice filled with doubt. Across endless plains and over the most difficult mountain ranges, it will wear out your animals. Again, Father answered quietly, I understand the difficulties of the journey and its dangers, but thousands are making it each year. We know how to prepare for it better than they did in the 40s. Grandma, I thought suddenly, my tiny, smiling, white-haired grandmother who had taken care of me for 6 years after my own mother died, until Father married again. Only a few months ago, she had come from Indiana to be near us. How could I possibly leave her again? And there was the schoolhouse just 2 miles down the road, with its smells of chalk and lunch pails and old wood smoke. I loved everything about school, especially reading and committing my favorite poems to memory. And the meeting house where we sang hymns each Sunday, I was partial to singing too. In that wilderness out west, there would be no schoolhouses or meeting houses, I was sure. Out on the plains, pronounced George Kimball in his slow, sorrowful way, the storms are terrible. Thunder and lightning like you've never seen, hailstones as big as hen's eggs. And if you don't cross the mountains before the snows begin, blizzards will get you. You remember what happened to the Donner Party. If you want to do some research on the Donner Party, you can. I had overheard Father and Mother once talking about those unlucky travelers trapped without food in the snowy mountains. They had stopped when they saw me. But from Mother's hushed voice and Father's slowly shaking head, I knew that whatever had happened to the Donner Party was dreadful. Father was silent. Surely, I thought, this meant that he was reconsidering. He would not really put the family through hardships like these. Straining to catch a glimpse of his face, I leaned over. Mary Ellen, what are you doing out of bed? It was Mother's face instead, surprised and stern at the foot of the ladder, with her skin as white as china and her pale hair pulled back from her face. She looked ghostly in the dim light. I knew it was useless trying to explain. Mother had her rules, and she didn't take kindly to anyone breaking them now. Back to bed, she ordered, frowning. Quickly now. Yes, ma'am, I whispered, and quick and quiet as a rabbit, I crept back to my bed.